Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. He's already laughing. You have tuned into the Rebel News live stream on this, a Tuesday, September 14th, 2021. I'm David Menzies, and my guest co-host today, well, as you can tell, the lovely Sheila Gunn Reid, the she-devil with a sword, the Khaleesi of Northern Alberta. She is on a special assignment today, so I'm happy to be joined by high-energy Andrew Says. How you doing today, Andrew?
It's just the volume of your voice that gets me. It reminds me of Austin Powers when he can't control the volume of his voice. I'm doing well, David Menzies. Thanks for joining us on the daily live stream where we take your questions, comments, and concerns.
Yes, and you know, you've got a new nickname. You know, there's a rumor around the office. We are calling High Energy Andrew Says Mr. Moonlight because we strongly suspect he is the announcer on Sirius Radio for Yacht Rock Radio. It's an easy listening format that goes until the end of summer. I guess that's September 21st.
Do we know the announcer's name? Maybe producer Justin?
No, it's never given, which adds further fuel to the fire.
It's interesting, isn't it?
But if anyone out there has a Sirius Radio, tune into Yacht Rock Radio and tell me, is it Andrew Says or isn't it?
Well, that's very pressing news. Thanks for putting that right off the top. Of course, the live stream is to go over our latest stories, the stories around the world, which we have many of today, and of course, taking your hyper chats on Odyssey, your Rumble rants on Rumble, not on Rebel, but on rebelnews.com even. And of course, you can catch us on Super U. And at some point, we're going to say goodbye to the YouTube audience today because we don't like YouTube too much. We love the audience, but not YouTube too much. And when things get too spicy for YouTube, we have to cut away, David, to save our souls.
And we can't even say the subjects that are too spicy because that would result in a strike. Hand to God, folks. That's how they roll in Silicon Valley. Couldn't make it up in the and to think that they're based in the land of the First Amendment. Then again, Google and the like don't consider themselves to be American companies. They are just companies that happen to be situated in America. They are nation states unto themselves, and boy, do they ever act like such. So, Andrew, so much on the docket here, and this is very interesting. Rebel investigates ATIP journalists on the payroll, and I think we have some video to run on that to set the stage. Let's check it out, folks.
Do we?
I have in my hands the list of journalists who secretly took a $61 million pre-election payoff from Justin Trudeau. Trudeau shoveled it out the door to them just before he called the election, and he kept the list a secret until now. You can see the list for yourself at rebelinvestigates.com. Seriously, go there and take a look. The list is 29 pages long. I've printed it off here. If I've counted right, there are 49 names on each page, and it's 29 pages long. By my math, that means there's almost 1,500 news media who took the bribe. It's actually more than that because this doesn't list individual reporters, but rather companies. So you can see that Maclean's magazine was given a $313,000 pre-election top-up by Trudeau, one of the largest. They don't list all the individual prostitutes at Maclean's. They just name the brothel. Oh, I'm sorry, is that too rude for you? I apologize. What would you call it instead that's more accurate? A bribe, a payoff, a kickback, an insurance policy? How about a special pre-election gratuity paid to the very journalists who were about to cover Trudeau's election campaign so lovingly? $61 million can ensure that it was loving. I mean, if someone gave you $61 million or even just the $313,000 that Maclean's got, you'd probably love them or at least fake it. Prostitution is the world's oldest profession, and journalists are not known for their high morals. We didn't hear about these secret payments from any of the nearly 1,500 news media who received them, did we? Think about that for a moment. They had the news. They were in on the news. They were in the middle of it. They didn't dare share the news with you, their readers. They deliberately kept the news a secret from you because it showed that they were in Trudeau's pocket, and they didn't want you to know that because they know you already don't trust the media very much, and this would make it much, much worse. I mean, taking a government bailout at any time is a disaster for the reputation of the independence of the press. If you have an adjective in front of the word journalist, like government journalist. It just completely changes the meaning of the word. We all know that you can't trust Trudeau's CBC state broadcaster because of that, but now he's injected himself into nearly 1,500 other private sector media, if you can even still call them that. I won't call these 1,500 companies corporate welfare bums because all that means is they're mooches. Now, of course, they are that. And of course, it is gross giving these mooches $61 million of public money in the middle of a pandemic as if they're a high priority. But it's not just the shocking amount of money. Trudeau spends more than $1 billion a day. It's that he has corrupted the media. It's like what he tried to do when Jody Wilson-Raybould stopped him. He was trying to corrupt the criminal prosecution of his friends at SNC-Lavalin, and she wouldn't let it happen on her watch. 1,500 news media were all too happy to let it happen on their watch. They're part of it. It's an inside job. They took the dough. We only heard about this from one of the few media in Canada who are not on this 29-page list, a small reader-supported news outlet in Ottawa called Blacklock's Reporter. They're not cheap to subscribe. If I recall, their annual subscription's about $300, but it's worth every penny to me. They break all sorts of news, and we have to support them because they're one of the few truth tellers out there who aren't in Trudeau's pocket. Anyways, here's what Blacklock's report last month. Now the subsidies are secret. Heritage Minister Stephen Guilbeault's department refuses to name publishers awarded nearly $61 million in pre-election emergency relief. The grants were to ensure readers receive timely information they require from their government, Guilbeault wrote in a letter to MPs. I love that. If they didn't give $61 million to their friends in the media on the eve of an election, maybe those reporters wouldn't report the news in a timely way. Is that what they're arguing? I don't even get it. I'll read one more line. The letter disclosed unnamed publishers received $60.8 million as emergency support through an existing Heritage Department program called Aid to Publishers. The grants were in addition to annual subsidies already paid, including proceeds from a $595 million media bailout approved by Parliament in 2018. So this latest payout is on top of the $600 million. They plan to keep the name secret, though, until after the election. Well, when we saw that Blacklock story, we immediately filed an access to information request to the government. And to my surprise, the government actually answered us in the required 30 days. That is very rare. Trudeau has sometimes delayed access to information requests by as much as 5 years when he's really embarrassed about something. So maybe there's someone in the bureaucracy who's as disgusted as we are by this massive bribe, and he wanted the news to get out sooner. So we simply asked for the list and we got it. And again, why did no one else do that? Well, duh, because nearly 1,500 journalists and news media organizations are implicated in it. This is a list of sellouts is what this is. It's a list of compromised media. I'm sorry, it's different. I mean, corporate welfare bums are always discreditable. Bombardier, SNC-Lavalin, all the crooked companies. That's just normal crooked, though. But the people on this list are supposed to be the watchdogs, the guardians, the ones holding the government to account. Them taking a bribe is much worse than some, I don't know, chewing gum factory taking a bribe. And the fact that they started their service to Trudeau immediately, they immediately tailored their coverage by not covering the payoff itself, shows they're fully in the tank for Trudeau. Imagine if Blacklock's hadn't broken this story last month. And imagine if we didn't file the access to information request. The other 1,500 news media companies in Canada would simply have hidden it from you. They're colluding is my point. But really, are you surprised? They've colluded to kick out Rebel News time and again. We had to go to the federal court just last week to get access to the debates. And not only did no journalists support us getting in, other than Candace Malcolm and Andrew Lawton from True North, but when we won in court, most journalists who expressed an opinion actually denounced us. Here's a press release from Trudeau's bailout media in Quebec denouncing Rebel News, saying we should never have been allowed in to the debates. It's in French. To be clear, this is a Quebec Union of Reporters saying the federal court was wrong to have upheld freedom of the press. Now, I can see why. They're all on this list. They're all bought and paid for. And so our mere presence embarrasses them. It's why you'll never see any of them asking a real question like this one.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Alexandre pour Rebel News. Donc, Monsieur Trudeau, je vais revenir rapidement sur ce qui s'est passé hier. Vous avez diabolisé l'un des rares médias qui ne reçoit pas d'argent du gouvernement. Vous avez exprimé votre opinion en disant que nous propageons la désinformation. Si c'était vrai, et si c'était le cas, la Cour fédérale ne nous aurait pas permis d'être ici aujourd'hui. Je suis moi-même scientifique et je me base sur les faits. Ma question est la suivante. L'Israël est l'un des pays les plus vaccinés au monde. Ils sont rendus maintenant à leur 4e rappel de vaccin. Ils ne considèrent plus que ceux qui ont reçu 2 doses de vaccin sont pleinement vaccinés. Ma question est, plusieurs Canadiens ne désirent pas avoir un rappel de vaccin. Allez-vous leur enlever leurs privilèges reliés au passeport vaccinal? Et aurez-vous l'obligeance de répondre à ma question en tant que Premier ministre ou allez-vous encore diaboliser mon média?
J'ai partagé ma perspective sur ton organisation hier soir. J'ai plus rien à dire.
Oh, so he's stealing a page from Blanchette and Jagmeet Singh. I do not answer questions from Rebel News. And therefore, do not answer to the high percentage of Canadians that disagree with me. And this man is our Prime Minister and wants to continue being our Prime Minister. Great commentary from the boss man, Ezra Levant. Want to point out one error, though. He said prostitution is the oldest profession. It is actually, folks, hunting and agriculture, because you got to have a full stomach. That's on the top level of the hierarchy of needs. Anyway, other than that, what do you make of this?
Producer Justin, did you approve of these stories beforehand?
Here's the first thing, Andrew. Not so much that 61 million as a top-up fee to the original 595 million, plus the billion plus that goes to CBC and 'twas ever thus. But the very idea that we as Canadians don't have the right to know who's getting this corporate welfare, that's beyond the pale. That's so egregious to me.
Yeah, and you know how I try to think of the best of the situation, David Menzies.
Yes.
Best case scenario, wouldn't you want to believe that this is all advertising money for the election? The federal government wants to advertise for a re-election. If that were the case, then why is it secret? Would be my very first question. Now I have this stack of paper in front of me,
wow.
the list of it all. I went through a bunch of them, of the most egregious offenders on my Twitter. There you go, you can see it. But I just want to name, we can cut back, Justin, if you want. I got some more here. Black Press Group, it's basically every local newspaper in the entire country, from Snapped in Durham, this crappy little photography newspaper that serves the region of Durham, getting like $23,000.
$28,000, I believe you said, right?
$28,000 from Snap. But then you have a giant like the Black Press Group out west, and I just want to list off some of these because you might be watching from these places. Chilliwack Progress, $238,000. Penticton Western News, $112K. Surrey Now Leader, $238,000. Comox Valley, $200,000. Maple Ridge Pitt Meadows News, $211,000. Vernon Morning Star, $177,000. Abbotsford News, $244,000. And now the Black Press Group on its own is about $5 million. I think they're the biggest payout recipient from this election. Then we go to another, then we get into the weirdness of it all. About what are they doing with this money? If it's not just advertising, then if it is just advertising, why can't you just talk about it openly? The Annex Publishing and Printing Incorporated, these are these magazines they have. They're so generic, but yet they're receiving emergency federal funding for the election. We have Fruit and Vegetable receiving $21,000.
Oh, the last issue just landed on my desk the other day. I think it was about Macintosh apples or something like that.
Canadian Pizza, $27,000. Canadian Rental Service, $40,000. We've got Canadian Poultry Magazine receiving $110,000.
So these are trade magazines.
Yes. Greenhouse Canada Security, Groundwater Canada. You're going to like this one. Manure Manager got $53,000. Potatoes in Canada only did $13,000. Baker's Journal, $47,000. David Menzies. Let's pick up a piece of paper at random, like Chris Angel or David Blaine. We're going to throw some at the screen.
Wow, look at that.
We're going to pick one out here with these are all $5,000, these ones. You want a random one? Pole Position. I'm guessing that's a racing magazine. What else we got? Turtle Island News.
Or it could be a magazine for strippers.
You can't talk about these things, David Menzies. We can just go anywhere.
Got the thumbs up from John.
Calgary's Child Magazine, $150,000. Mining Life and Exploration News, $50,000. So it's like every ethnic paper, every local paper, every large newspaper that's servicing Western Canada, Quebec. There's a couple of them that are Quebec. I pointed out on my Twitter. There's a men's magazine that received a couple $100,000.
Oh, which one?
Men's Style, I believe.
Oh, okay, that kind of men's magazine. I think we were talking about something else.
David Menzies, producer Justin, we're talking about serious topics, and David Menzies can't.
No, it's laughable. I mean,
is.
and surely there was a punchline there when you mentioned Manure
right.
Manager magazine.
But what are these companies doing with all this money?
I'll tell you.
And even if it is advertising, what does Manure Magazine or Canadian Potato need with political advertising?
Do you know, I spoke to a local, I can't remember who it was, and I said it was about the whole, before this story broke, this whole idea of federal subsidies of taxpayer money going to prop up these newspapers and periodicals. And he said very unapologetically, but you don't understand, if we don't get it, we'll go out of business. Now, I'm not hoping that anyone goes out of business, but here's the deal. Let's put the clock back. Let's say we get into a DeLorean with the flux capacitor. We go back up, say 120 years ago, the infancy of the automobile industry. Could you imagine the manufacturers of buggy whips and wagon wheels going to the government? Hey, these newfangled automobiles, they're going to put the horse and carriage business out of business. And the answer to that is, yeah, it's called progress. I'm saying it, Andrew, and this is the exact same thing Maxime Bernier has said, who you will be meeting on a yacht in a couple of days.
Yacht Rock Radio, hit me up.
Adding further speculation that he is the voice of Yacht Rock Radio. If you can't make it, you go out of business. It's not the government's role and indirectly the taxpayer's role, or I should say directly the taxpayer role, to prop up dead dogs. But that is the model here. Bombardier is the king of the castle when it comes to that. And these little schleppers getting like 5,000 here, 6,000 there. It's the same flawed business model. If you can't, I'm so sorry, if you can't make it, you gotta go out of business. You're not entitled to your entitlements.
It's not Men's Magazine, it's Sharp Magazine. Sharp, the book for men, and S Magazine. They received over $700,000 in total for those three. Military Family Magazine, Lifestyle, $52,000. Mountain Sledder Snowmobile Magazine, $32,000. Canadian Punjab Times. Like they went after, they just reached out to literally anyone. And I'm guessing it said, do you need help sustaining or making a push for the federal election coming up? Well, the Justin Trudeau is here to help you. Hey, by the way, here's some talking points from Justin Trudeau. By the way, here's our press releases from now on. Do you want to be included in the Cool Kids Club? Do you want to be that kid Keane Bexley made fun of at the debates?
Oh, the one from Germany. Oh, my goodness. You know, how do you deal with the hatred on the campaign trail? He flew all the way in from Berlin or Cologne or wherever to ask that question. Absolutely incredible. But you know what? This is just so beyond the pale in terms of journalistic ethics, Andrew. Once upon a time, that was a word you would associate with the mainstream media. I think that ship has sailed. What I'm saying is you can't accept money from anyone that you're covering because that puts you in an inherently biased position. And I'll tell you a story. This happened in the late 80s, and I don't think it would ever happen today. I think it was around, I'm going by memory, I think it was 1989. Around then, you had the Exxon Valdez disaster in Alaska. And the Toronto Star flew a reporter and photographer up to cover. That was the biggest story in the world at the time. And they got to the furthest airport, I guess they could go to in Alaska, but they had to go further out remote, and that was only accessible by helicopter, and only Exxon had the helicopter. And as the story goes, the reporter and photographer got into the Exxon helicopter and went out to cover the story. In the aftermath, the Star bean counters figured out if that had been a private helicopter that the Star would have to hire, it was X amount of money. So they found out what that amount was. They wrote a check to Exxon to cover the rides, basically to say, We have no skin in the game. You gave us a free ride, but it's not like we're going to be favorable to you because we paid our debt of what we would have paid to a private helicopter service. That should be applauded. That is the star going above and beyond the call of duty, I think. I don't think they would have fallen in love with Exxon for a free helicopter ride. The point is they've gone from that to pigs at the trough, gobbling up millions and millions of dollars of tax dollars. And this is coming from a federal government that they should be covering. As Ezra likes to say, the watchdogs have now become the lapdogs because they are in an inherently conflict of interest position. And this secrecy and the fact that, and the proof is in the pudding, or the cherry cheesecake, as Doug Ford would say, the fact that none of these media outlets, Andrew, would file an FOI, a Freedom of Information request, to find out who's getting paid. I think that tells the whole story. It's one big secret. Well, the secret's out.
Well, I think if you want to take advertising from any political company, I mean, the Globe and Mail takes money from the Chinese government,
Yes.
and not for what it's worth. I don't know if you can directly not trust them for that. They are known as being harsher on China than other mainstream media. But I think you should be able to take money from any advertiser you want unless they're committing genocide, which I guess China is. But my point is, you can still talk about something and make it clear to the people that you're not going to be biased to them. Obviously, it's difficult if you're taking money from Reebok to, take a crap on Reebok when you're talking about if their shoes are bad. Shout out Reebok. They sponsor the show now. I wish. I think you can do that and still be impartial. But like you said, the secrecy of it and the timing of it and the fact that nobody else wants to talk about it is what is extremely strange. Go ahead.
Andrew, with all due respect, I don't think you can be impartial if you're taking money. I mean, just imagine if a Toronto Star reporter or a Globe and Mail reporter went to a construction site where there had been a disaster, and the owner of the construction company came up to the journalist and said, hey, go out on the town on me, and stuffed a couple of grand into his or her pocket. Do you think they can cover that story with clean hands after that? Of course you have to refuse. That's a bribe. Why would they refuse it from the private sector but take it from the public sector?
I'm not saying that I would do it. What I'm saying is I think it is possible. But there's a lot of examples where it's not possible. CNN doesn't talk bad about pharmaceutical companies. You watch CNN, there's nothing but, the 6,500 warnings at the bottom of the screen.
Oh, isn't that amazing?
When a pharmaceutical company commercial airs. So I think it is possible. I mean, I think we see it from other places. If Justin Trudeau wants to pay me $100,000 and I can still, trash talk him, then maybe I'd consider it. But I'm not going to, because Justin Trudeau, what he does with his money is it's taking tax dollars. I don't want to take other people's dollars that are literally coming out of other Canadians' pockets and say, this is what your opinion is going towards. So if a private company or a political party who's not taking taxpayer dollars gives money to, Potato Weekly, then I don't think that, I think it's possible for them that they can be impartial. But when you're taking government dollars, which is taxpayers' dollars, and it's $61 million spread all across the country. And I think it would be very hard. You'd have to convince me that it's not for the benefit of the federal government, because why else would they do it?
100%. And Andrew, let's say I believe you that if the Trudeau administration cut you a check for $100K and you...
Not the administration, Justin Trudeau, his own personal money.
Yes. Oh, that's not going to happen. But let's say you got that six-figure incentive. And let's say I believe you that you'd be just as hard on the Justin Trudeau Liberals as you've always been. The problem is the optics.
Of course.
And people would inevitably say, okay, he was pretty hard on Trudeau on this issue, but what is Andrew Says holding back on? That would always be, the gorilla in the corner or the elephant in the room. And therefore, it's funny. People sometimes attack us, Andrew. Oh, there goes Rebel News begging again. I say the fundraising we do, where it's voluntary. You can tune in and watch for free. That's great. You can tune in and be a donor. I think that is the most honest way of fundraising there is, Andrew, compared to the taxpayer-funded media, which it just keeps going and going. It reminds me of Rogers, the negative option billing they did back in 1994, where they simply added channels, whether you wanted them or not, and billed you for them, and you had to phone in and opt out. But actually, what am I saying? You can't even do that. I can't phone the Treasury and say, can I have a refund for the CBC because I never ever watch it, so I want my, whatever it is, $98.17 back. It ain't going to happen.
I think that's where we need to start going towards for the future of our country and a democracy, is more transparency in where our money is going to. I think there should be mandatory things like roads and healthcare, obviously, in this country where our money is going towards. But what if we're getting sent a list, or it's every 4 years at election time, where I get to choose where a lot of my tax money is going? This is me personally, I think I should get to choose if I have health insurance coverage or not. Maybe somebody's 50 years old and they've never had a visit to the hospital or the doctor, and they want to not pay into that. Why can't you do that?
No.
And other things like the CBC. Why can't I opt out of this? This is the future of our democracy, where the government has to stop taking so much money from you so they can spend it frivolously on things like this. Because if they don't have that money, then they can't spend it. They always take it through increased taxes and through all these programs they say they're going to get to, and it never happens. Even something as simple as road maintenance, which should be kept up to date, is often not. How often did Justin Trudeau say infrastructure in his first campaign for Prime Minister? Things that never happened.
Well, and that comes to the question, Andrew, of what is the role of government? You mentioned infrastructure. Yeah, we need roads and bridges and whatnot. The military, of course, that's not, farmed out to private sector interests. But funding newspapers, funding broadcasters on a provincial basis, running liquor monopolies, running casino monopolies.
Like yeah,
absolutely. When it comes to things like, say it's liquor, lottery tickets, casinos, the role of government isn't to run stores and places of gambling. Their role is to tax and regulate it. Everything else belongs to the private sector, but it isn't. And this is really what we have to have, is a common sense revolution to get government the hell out of business that they don't belong in.
And I think everyone can get behind that sort of thing. From Rumble, Enmark says, WestJet is thinking about firing all WestJetters who haven't had an injection in the WestJetters. Speaking of which, producer Justin, I think we should go away from YouTube now. Are we able to do that? And as we talk about injections and stuff?
Good call.
Unfortunately, YouTube won't allow us to talk about these things, everybody. So we want to give you...
You can't even talk about what we can't talk about.
Okay, you can't?
No. I had Mr. Producer yell at me in my earpiece the other day for that. So.
Please go to rebelnews.com and you can find our other links there. We are on Rumble. We're about to switch over to Super U and Odyssey. All places with live chat, so don't worry about that. So please head on over now. And the last image you're going to see is David Menzies' face here, YouTube. I'm sorry. We're giving you 10 seconds of David Menzies' commentary. Go.
Maybe we can give the initials of stuff we can't talk about. One starts with a V. The other one starts with V and F. And I've said enough.
I think we give them long enough, producer Justin.